How you doing? Welcome to DICE 2022. My name is Pádraig Lynch and I'm a lecturer in Design and Creative Media with LYIT. We're 22 days away from joining GMIT and Sligo IT to become the Atlantic Technology University. I teach on the UX Design Masters and I'm currently facilitating the Emerging Technologies module where the idea for this evening's event came from. So this is LYIT's 8th DICE conference, DICE standing for Design, Innovation, Creativity and Enterprise. And it's curated by our Department of Design and Creative Media, and it coincides with the Enterprise Week as well. We're celebrating creativity on a local, national and global scale, showcasing industry and graduate successes in animation, graphics, fashion, film and UX design. DICE continues tomorrow, and there's an exciting lineup for you to tune into as well from 9:20 tomorrow morning. We've got Orla O'Hagan on. She's an accessories designer, and Orla's company called Orla Vera Accessories is produced in Buncrana and boasts an international client base and is seen as an emerging brand in sustainable Irish design. Then we've got James O'Dahari, multidisciplinary director. James is an animator delivering world-class gig visuals for the likes of Katy Perry, Billie Eilish, and for brands such as Sony and Disney. Mark Pudliner is an animator and storyboard artist. He'll be on tomorrow as well. He's 35 years in the business and has film credits such as An American Tail, The Land Before Time, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, Shrek 2, loads of really good animations. And last but not least, then tomorrow is Chloe Dahari. Chloe is a recent graduate with first class honours from graphic and digital design at LYIT, and she received International Society of Typographic Designers Award for her recognition of her typographic work recently. She now works with TCS, previously Primerica. So you can tune into all those talks tomorrow they're between 9:20 a.m. and 12:15 p.m. And you can go to dice.lyitdesign.com. It'll also be on YouTube and all social media channels as well. But tonight we're talking about something else. You'll have heard the name by now. Some people are whispering about it, others are shouting about it. Zuckerberg gave it a serious nudge recently when Facebook changed its company name. Some are buying property on it, others are purchasing digital clothes on it. Many are afraid of it, and some are embracing it. We're of course talking about the new Wild West, the Metaverse. And this evening we're posing the question: are you in or are you out? So our excellent group of emerging technology students have been busy the last few weeks. They're currently studying on the UX design and applied innovation course. And in their emerging tech module, they've created 2 5-minute kind of lifting the lid videos on insights into the metaverse for those that are new to the topic. So we're breaking new ground on that UX Design Masters this year at LYIT, and we're currently kind of knee deep in the process of trialing a fully online module fully immersed in VR, a fully immersive VR classroom. And we'll have more on that later on from our learning support and our students. With the help of the business school, we've delivered the Oculus Quest headsets to our students all the way from Malaysia to Mayo, from Brazil to Buncrana, and we'll hear from the students and some of the team later on. So before I introduce our first speaker, let's take a look at the first of our Lifting the Lid Metaverse videos from our UX students. And this first video is from, they've called themselves Team Fusion. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind rolling the first video there, please.
Hello, we're Team MetaFusion, and we're going to take you on our journey of understanding of what is Metaverse and how do we and others feel about it. We all had various thoughts on what Metaverse meant. Some of us started from scratch, and others started with bias from previous experience. The adoption curve explains how technologies tend to be adopted by users over time, breaking the users into sections depending on how quickly they adopt. As Forbes 2020 explains, diffusion of innovations is a theory explaining how, why, and at what rate new ideas and technology spread along the adoption curve. This is important because investors are more likely to back technology that is quickly going through the early stages of the curve. One of the ways investors can track scope and pace of adoption is by quantifying the social mentions of a technology or brand. As you'll see from this curve, our team are starting off in numerous positions along the curve. Have a think about where you might sit with the knowledge you have so far.
The first internet, Web 1.0, functioned like a digital library where users could read rather than create content. Web 2.0, the internet we know today, is about user-generated content with interactive 2D technology connecting people digitally. The metaverse is the next evolution, a Web 3.0, an immersive 3D virtual world which instead of simply being viewed, will be experienced as if it were reality.
We hand over a lot of information to these virtual reality platforms while most of us aren't even fully aware of what information we're given out about ourselves. For example, some platforms like Spatial even record a video of your real-life surroundings while you're using their application. It stands as a reminder to always try and be aware of what information you're given out about yourself online.
Who owns the metaverse? The answer is everyone and no one. Just as no one truly owns the internet, no one person or company owns the metaverse. But there are companies and people who hold a massive sway, like Meta, Microsoft and Shopify. The most crucial factor for creating an elaborate visual universe is staring at this very screen right now. Yes, we are all the creators of the metaverse.
The rules of the metaverse are not yet written. The speed and the scale of the technology is completely outpacing the government systems designed to safeguard people and regulate the technology. A virtual world doesn't have the geopolitical boundaries used to govern the real world. So who regulates these spaces? If it's built by individuals, will they police it? Or will people become ever more dependent on big tech corporations to safeguard their welfare?
With so few people working at the cutting edge of this technology, do they truly understand what they're creating and what that means for the general population? For many, they are jumping on board with a surface level understanding of the complexities of metaverses. Is this part of a larger campaign by companies such as Facebook, now known as Meta, to help push metaverses through the adoption curve more quickly? As you'll see, some of the team have begun to move along the adoption curve, and others are still holding tight. Whilst you think about where you are on the curve now, here's what others have had to say.
Yeah, that wouldn't be my thing. I like the disconnection where it's on my time and I have control of it. That sounds a bit too in-depth for me, where you're completely immersed in it and you can jump between platforms.
If there's some constraints and maybe legal frameworks and data protection around how it's used, then may be comfortable about interacting with it.
It doesn't feel like it's a healthy way to exist, like to live, to create a reality which is not at all real.
Defining the metaverse is no easy task. When you Google the term, you'll find several definitions. Time explains the word was coined in 1992 dystopian novel Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. From our research, it is evident that the term will not be defined by one single person or company, but by many, and evolve over time.
I'm in because I want to know more, and I'm out because I think it sounds kind of scary.
Out.
I am out, but I don't think we'll have a choice. In the future, we'll all be in.
Out for the moment.
Despite some reservations on kind of ethics and safety and security, I am in.
Definitely out.
In.
You're in.
Out.
In summary, some people are on board and some people aren't. Really, we feel the question is more around how on board are you? It's not as simple as yes or no. A lot of users feel pressured by technology that if they don't get on board, they'll fall behind in everyday life. As human beings, we invite you to reflect on how you feel about metaverses, emerging technology, and what that means for humankind. Thank you.
There you go. Hopefully that's cleared a few things up. A superb overview there from Team Fusion. We'll have the second team presentation after the next speaker. So the students started the Emerging Tech module in February, and with very little knowledge of the metaverse. We'd only heard about it really, but hopefully they have helped you to shed some light on this new virtual world through the presentation. So speaking of virtual worlds, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker this evening, Tom Houston. Tom is the CEO at Centurial. I think I pronounced it wrong again. A Belfast-based company that delivers VR and AR training applications and experiences. Their team are experts in AI and creative training applications, create training applications within unique experiences. They have clients all over the world across multiple sectors. So I'll pass over to Tom.
Thank you, Porrick. It's great to be actually taking part in this tonight. So it's married for 30 years, 3 kids. I think the opportunity to speak for 15 minutes without anyone interrupting it's something worth doing. Okay, so delighted to take part in this. So I don't know, can someone run up my presentation there? Perfect. So company, we pronounce it as Centurial, but we've been called many things, so we don't really mind when people get it wrong. We've been in this business for around 8-9 years, and so we're almost kind of veterans at this stage. And you can imagine virtual reality and augmented reality back in 2013 was a bit like black magic, and to a certain extent, it kind of still is a bit like that today. So I was asked to speak at an event before Christmas, and it was just after Zuckerberg made the whole announcement about the metaverse. And of course, they asked me then, well, can you explain what the metaverse is? And quite cheekily, this was my definition. And I would stick by a lot of this. I think that the announcement of the metaverse from Meta or from Facebook was literally to change a narrative that they just didn't want. Of course, we can all then look at it and go, well, the real definition, of course, is a combination of many things. It's immersive technology combined effectively with the internet, where in theory you can live within that digital universe. I think the one thing I'll give Mark Zuckerberg a huge amount of credit for is that it's probably the first time I've seen someone create an avatar that looks more human than the actual individual it's meant to represent. So he's done well with that. I think some of the things he's talked about and some of the way it's been presented, I think is slightly misleading, certainly with the technology that exists today from Meta. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about and a lot of the stuff that Mark Zuckerberg has talked about the metaverse has existed for quite a while. And I suppose that's where I start to have some issues with it. You know, companies like BrandLab 360 have created effectively a metaverse, a number of years ago. What they talk about is a 360 environment with functioning economy, where you can visit stores and interact with products, sit down and chat with someone and have a realistic avatar. And where I start to have issues with this is I can do all that this evening after this event by going to the local shopping centre. And I think that one of the things we have to be very careful about, and one of the things where a lot of technology, at least in its first iteration, fails, is because what we try and do is we try to take something that exists perfectly well in normal life and we just try to digitize it. And I think that's when people start to become very skeptical. I think what we have to look at is how can we actually enhance things and how can we move things on a little bit. Of course, the one thing that everyone then talks about is, well, what about events? And there was a lot of companies got a lot of money from governments around COVID based around how we can virtualize events. And some of them were really, really successful. If we have a look at that one, the Mood Up conference, it's kind of typical of a lot of them. And I think it just looks horrible, if I'm being completely honest. You're looking at a lot of the delegates, a lot of the attendees here or there, which are just kind of cookie cutter type avatars. You can't see any expressions. There's no way you can really interact with any of the individuals. And the worst thing is they're all kind of sitting there and they're watching a video that's running on a big two-dimensional screen. So the question is, where is the real value being added? And I've been fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your view, to attend a lot of conferences throughout my career. And I can tell you that most of the learning is not done in the main conference hall. It's done in the bar afterwards when you're chatting with people and you're building relationships with people from other businesses. And that's completely lost in a virtual event, especially since most people are sitting like this at home. You're sitting with a headset on and it actually becomes uncomfortable. And I say that as a business who, this is our bread and butter, this is what we do, but we've also had to be very pragmatic about what we develop for people and how we recommend what we're doing. So I found this actually online not too long ago, and this is a major company that flew a load of people out to Dubai and positioned them on the beach, and gave them VR experiences. And for the life of me, I can't understand why. You know, this is the view that those guys were actually looking at before they put the headset on. And again, I think we have to be very careful that we're not shoehorning virtual reality in particular into situations where it doesn't really add value. So some actual reality, I suppose. You know, so I think AR and VR, or the metaverse, they're absolutely fantastic at giving people an experience that otherwise they wouldn't get. And I think the experience is the key thing. And it's also the fact that it's something you can't do in normal life. You know, being able to enter the metaverse and be able to fly on a spaceship or something, to go up to an orbiter, they're things that people normally won't be able to do. That's what it's for. They're amazing sort of things, not replacing day-to-day tasks. You know, it really is a poor substitution for real life. And so our view would be, stop copying real life. There's many other things we can do. And I think that's where at the moment, this first version of the metaverse is failing, or will fail. It's because we're trying to take real life things and just digitize them and make them in VR, and people will very quickly get bored with that. So for me, I'm kind of out, sort of, but not really, and kind of for now, which I suppose sums up a lot of the comments that we've seen in that first video. So I think it's more interesting to talk about where we're actually going with this. We absolutely believe the actual use of virtual reality will reduce, and it will reduce dramatically. Hands-free augmented reality, so by that I mean people wearing glasses, will become the dominant immersive reality experience, both in and out of a metaverse. Now, at the moment, this is typically what people have to wear if they're using augmented reality hands-free. This is a product called the Hololens from Microsoft. It's about 2,500 to 3,000 euros, and no one sensible is really going to wear that out in the street for fear of being laughed at. But that's not the full story. There's an awful lot of things happening in this space. So this is a company called Vuzix, launched these glasses actually at the start of this year. So these are available. You can buy these today. They're augmented reality glasses, and they just look like normal glasses. They won some of the awards at CES in Las Vegas at the start of the year. We're all waiting on Apple making their entry into the market. We're already starting to see a number of different signs that it's imminent. You know, so we're starting to see the renders that people are guessing what it's going to look like. There's a lot of them now very similar, so the leaks are actually starting to come out. We're also starting to see mention of things like a reality OS in some of the code of some of Apple's products. The other thing is Apple have spent a huge amount of money embedding technology like LiDAR scanners into their phones and their iPads, which are absolutely seeding the market for an augmented reality future. So generally when Apple enter a market, they legitimize it. So I remember years ago buying what was one of the first smartwatches, a Motorola smartwatch, and it looked awful. My wife refused to walk beside me when I was wearing it. I thought it was great. And everyone kind of laughed at me, to be honest. But all of a sudden, Apple bring out their Apple Watch, and now everybody has them. They legitimize markets, and they will legitimize the augmented reality market. A bit further into the future, a company called Mojo are actually developing contact lenses that have augmented reality, which is crazy to think that can happen. The lens apparently is the size of a grain of sand. I've already contacted them and tried to get a set, but they've just completely ignored me, unfortunately. But I'm really keen to see what way they work. So for me, I think the metaverse will really start to take off when we do look at how we can augment existing reality. How can we put digital content into our normal daily lives and how that helps us in our daily lives. So this is obviously a scene from Kingsman, which sometimes movies are our worst enemy, but this probably is as close to how the future might be in an augmented reality metaverse. But the technology already exists, and that's the really interesting thing. It's one of these areas where the software has been around for a number of years, and now we're just waiting on the hardware catching up. So this was developed a number of years ago using a piece of Apple software called ARKit. So this guy Bruce Vine created this application that it can take a feed from your phone. It'll take your shopping list and it will guide you around the supermarket. And it sounds like a really stupid use, but these are the sort of applications that actually people will use. To be looking for an item in a shopping center or a supermarket, and to tell you exactly where it is. It sounds very, very mundane, but it's this type of technology that actually has a real use. Same with this type of thing. So this is, again, a real application using augmented reality. So the previous company that brought out those new glasses have a previous version of them called the Vuzix Blade. And this runs an application called Zoe Meet. This does real-time translation. So literally, as you're talking to someone, it brings up subtitles for your conversation. It's an incredible application to use. But again, it's there, it's available, and it's ready now. And this type of technology has actually been available for a number of years, and people don't know. So Google have put a lot of time and effort into an application called Google Lens, and a huge number of people, a lot of people just don't know about it, but it will give you translations. So if you hold this up and there's a foreign language, it will actually translate it on your phone for you. As far back as 2012, there was one of the TEDx conferences in Silicon Valley, and one of the organizers actually developed an application using mobile phone that when you held up did facial recognition using someone's LinkedIn profile. So it used their profile photo and then gave you links and told you all about that individual. So around that same time, so just remember it's like 10, 11 years ago, Facebook, Google, and Apple all made significant acquisitions around the use of facial recognition and how that can be used in a future metaverse. Which again, then I'm sure we'll get onto this later on, but it then starts to open up all sorts of questions around privacy. It was one of the reasons Google Glass, if anyone remembers that, failed, because a lot of places just banned it because having someone walk around somewhere with a camera on permanently was very uncomfortable for a lot of people, and that's one of the battles that we're going to have to overcome in the future, how we actually police all of this. So, in summary, a metaverse, of whatever you want to call it, that type of environment is absolutely inevitable. It is that next step, and I think the technology is becoming more accessible. It's really about how we use it and how we make a proper use of it. I think we'll see a public and a private versions, just like we have at the internet. So again, I think that organizations, companies will use a private metaverse where they can hold user manuals, where they can, so you can imagine, a telecoms engineer arriving out at your house trying to, fault find, and they will have access to confidential information about how the systems actually work. So it's like user manuals right in front of their face. But I think the reality is, while virtual reality is dominant, I think the metaverse will be a niche solution. And I think when we see Apple launching their product, which we think will be late 2022 or early 2023, I think that's when things will explode. And I think that's when we will start to see real applications that people can use that blend seamlessly with the real world. Instead of taking someone out of the real world and putting them in a metaverse, the metaverse will just become another aspect of the real world. So I think that's when things start to become very exciting. So that's me. I hope that was informative. My email is there on the screen. If anyone wants to ask any questions of me, feel free to send me an email. If it's just abuse, you can feel free to do that as well. Happy to field those.
I don't think you get much abuse there, Tom. Thanks a million. It was great to see the practicalities involved around the value proposition. And I love that quote, stop copying real life. It's going on so much when you go in there. It's that's what they're trying to do. Also, that kind of all around the AR and mixed reality progress, I agree that'll really move things along quickly, particularly in kind of everyday simple usage, as you say. So Tom's going to be joining us for the panel discussion later on, and we'll delve a bit deeper at that stage. But for now, let's take a look at the second of our Lifting the Lid Metaverse videos from our UX design students. So this video is from Team MMM, which stands for Meet Me in the Metaverse. So Mike, if you could roll video 2, please.
Hello there, we are Team MMM, which stands for Meet Me in Metaverse. We're going to share with you some of the opportunities that lie ahead within Metaverse and pick some key areas such as NFTs, fashion, music, as well as being mindful about the environmental impact. First, let's talk about music. A limitless experience is coming for the music industry in Metaverse, which has the potential to revolutionize the music industry as we know it and bring a new wave of limitless possibilities for artists with re-energized revenue streams. The industry has become stagnated from a loss of income from streaming sites and cancellation of shows because of the COVID-19 period. One key area for growth within Metaverse would be to stage virtual concerts and performances, being able to have creative freedom with fully curated environments via stages, outfits and appearances with both artists, attendees appearing as personalised avatars. We could also see artists moving out of conventional physical production studios to virtual ones. The Metaverse gives power to artists to reach a new and bigger audience, such as one recent concert on Fortnite that attracted millions of viewers to see Ariana Grande's show, making around $20 million in the process. This direction can lead to bigger revenue streams through ticketing, NFT merchandise, new royalties and opportunities with sonic branding for companies. As a fan within this realm, distance is not an issue, with you being able to attend your favourite artist show virtually anywhere in the world, thus creating a more social aspect and greater fan engagement. The connection and potential between Metaverse and music industry is unique. This innovation will revitalise the music and art industry. Although it is a long way off being perfect, it has the potential to place control back to the artists. Now I'm going to pass over to Anna, who's going to talk about NFTs.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be talking about NFTs in Metaverse. So, non-fungible token, what does it mean? Non-fungible means non-replaceable, unique, and it carries emotional value. This makes it much more valuable as there's only one of it. A token is an item represented on the blockchain. So the blockchain is a public record of all transactions without the use of a bank. So basically, the token is the block added to the blockchain that represents your transaction. So that is your non-fungible token. What can they be? So NFTs can digitally represent any asset. They can be real estate, digital artwork, can be in-game items such as avatars. They can be domain names. They can be event tickets, music, MP3 or MP4. So this raises the question about digital art galleries and the value of them. So some opportunities for sellers, creators and artists. They're able to sell original digital artwork where there might not be a market for it offline. So some opportunities for buyers or collectors is that they can financially support digital artists and hope that the value of a piece that they purchase goes up. And the big question, should I buy or invest in NFTs in Metaverse? The answer is, we don't know. The future is completely uncertain and everything is so new in Metaverse that there's really no data to look at. Experts have said that it may be worth investing in small amounts to try it for now and hope for the best.
Sustainability means ensuring that we meet our needs today without compromising the needs of future generations. Environmental protection is one main aspect of sustainable development, and it is affected in both positive and negative ways. First, the positives. Users could learn about sustainability by being engaged in it through immersive experiences. For example, users could experience the world's ecosystems through virtually walking on a coral reef in the Great Barrier Reef. By experiencing nature virtually, people gain greater appreciation and understanding of issues and motivation for stewardship of the Earth. Sustainability problems could be solved by creating citizen awareness and allowing users to explore possible solutions together as avatars. A large downside to the metaverse is the huge data storage required, which comes at a high environmental cost. Expansion of cloud VR technology for gaming and increased high-resolution video use massive amounts of energy and carbon emissions. Training one AI model could generate 5 times the greenhouse gases emitted in a car's lifetime. Just one NFT trading transaction on the Metaverse blockchain emits 110 kilograms of carbon dioxide, equivalent to watching over 18,000 hours of YouTube. But on the positive side, the Metaverse might offset emissions in other areas, like by hosting virtual concerts and moving offices to the Metaverse, which cuts emissions and commuting costs. It's all connected. Sea, space, land, and life. Let's make choices that guide the metaverse to be an agent of positive change in all these areas while creating innovative ideas to transform negative impacts into problem-solving opportunities in all aspects of our world.
Fashion and metaverse. Would you buy clothes that only exist digitally? And how much would you be willing to pay? What is digital fashion? Digital fashion is a 3D representation of clothing garments. They are created in professional 3D applications such as Clo3D and Marvelous Designer. Digital fashion NFTs are listed on digital fashion marketplaces such as DressX and The Dematerialized, where they can be bought, traded and collected. You can port your asset and wear it on your avatar while gaming, or attending meetings in Metaverse. Or you can upload your selfie and wear it on social media instantly. So what is the future of digital fashion? With emerging technologies, the line between physical and digital realities is blurring. Dematerialization of clothing is sure to revolutionise the fashion industry, as virtual clothes are almost all profit. In 2020, Metaverse startup Artifacts sold 620 pairs of virtual sneakers, designed by 18-year-old digital artist Viocious. They were sold for $3.1 million in less than 5 minutes. The startup was later acquired by Nike. The world's first Metaverse Fashion Week will take place in March 2022. With luxury brands Dolce & Gabbana and Tommy Hilfiger alongside digital-first entities such as DressX, it will set the course for the future of digital fashion shows in the Metaverse. We have just touched on how the Metaverse could change music, fashion and the environment, but it has capabilities to revolutionise many different areas. Will you join us in Metaverse?
Great work from Team MMM. More insights and lots of questions raised there as well. So this was a team project. These two videos, it was a team project on the Emergent Tech module on the UX Masters, and they both got the same brief. So both teams got the same brief, and they haven't seen each other's videos until tonight. And it's interesting to see how different both the videos were. So both teams went off in different kind of research directions. As I mentioned earlier, these students, they're currently testing the Oculus Quest 2 as a classroom learning experience, and we'll hear from learning support in the panel discussion as well, which be interesting. So we're experimenting with virtual platforms such as Spatial. Next week we're going to be trialing Meta's product Horizon Workrooms, and there's others at the minute we're kind of playing about with. And we're quickly realizing that the whole onboarding and getting this thing moving isn't as easy as expected. The aim really is to test whether or not a fully immersive VR classroom could work completely for the whole masters. So we're kind of piloting this in a module to see if perhaps next year that we could have more VR going on within this course. So we'll talk more about that in the panel after our next speaker. So I'd like to introduce you to our second speaker this evening. This is James Corbett. James is the co-founder at SimVirtua and sits on the board at Immersive. SimVirtua is a VR production studio currently guiding pharmaceutical clients on the implementation of VR and AR projects, and they offer strategic advice for clients entering and navigating the VR sector. And over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Pádraig. It's great to be here to speak to you all tonight. I had not seen those student videos either beforehand, but you'll think I had because a number of my slides are almost copies of what some of the students have. And I just hope I can say it as well as they did. They were really great videos. So, I think I've skipped my first slide there. Let me go back to the first one. So I think the question, you guys are asking tonight is, are you in or out? And is the grass greener? I think for me, the question in some regards is this the great deja vu? And the reason I say that is because I get deja vu every time I see a story about the metaverse today, because my entry point to what I'm doing today was actually in 2005 or 6, when this thing called Second Life was going through a massive hype cycle. And that was before Facebook and before Twitter became real things, or social media became a big deal. A lot of people thought that this idea of a three-dimensional virtual world would actually be the next evolutionary stage of the web. And of course, we know that didn't quite pan out. But as I say, this had a real big hype cycle at the time. A lot of people made a lot of money off of it, including the likes of Aung San Suu Kyi, there at top right, who appeared in Business Week magazine. And she made a lot of money buying and selling virtual land on Second Life, and buying and selling and making products like fashions, handbags, shoes, etc. So there was a real economy on Second Life, and they even had their own currency there called the Linden dollar. You'll see there a picture of the Blarney Stone pub, which was one of the most popular watering holes made by a guy called John Mahon, a Dublin airline pilot. I think he flew with Aer Lingus, and built a whole Dublin Second Life, which was a very popular destination. UCD had, and I think they might still have, a library there. The IDA actually even opened an office in Dublin Second Life. Bottom right there, you'll see writers, and practically every big brand at the time did something in Second Life. And I remember a Coca-Cola executive being asked at some stage, why were they doing what they were doing in Second Life? And he said, I didn't really know, but we couldn't be seen not to be doing something. So I think that, that fear of missing out, or FOMO as they call it, that was a real driver of a lot of the activity in Second Life. And it could be a real driver of a lot of what we see happening today. Or maybe it's a bit different, and we'll address that in a while. So just to underline, I guess, that Second Life was a three-dimensional virtual world. It wasn't a game like a massively multiplayer online role-playing game like World of Warcraft, in the sense that you didn't have, defined activities or, people to run around and kill or to kill you. There was no actual defined game. It was just whatever you made it yourself. By the way, it's worth noting that Second Life is still around. I shouldn't talk about it like it's in the past tense, because it's still there. I think there's still about 1 million active users, and it actually got a bit of a bounce during COVID, which I think underlines one of the qualities of virtual worlds like this. And that's the people, we all got tired of Zoom calls and video conferencing, and people found a need to connect in a way that video conferencing just doesn't do. Even if these avatars are kind of cartoonish, there can be more of a sense in some ways of actually being present with other people in these environments. So let's just address this question, because I think one of the confusing things, of course, in this area is that people don't really have a clear definition of what the metaverse is. And I'm not saying that this is the definition, you have to accept this, but this is a definition given by a guy called Benedict Evans, who is a very well-respected technical analyst and venture capitalist. I just think it's a very clear, elegant, simple definition, and I totally agree with it. He just says that the metaverse is the next stage. It's the evolution of virtual reality and augmented reality. And worth noting that this thing called Web3, which you'll often hear about, and a lot of people kind of confuse the two of these things. Web3 is a different thing. That's the evolution of cryptocurrencies or blockchain, which includes NFTs, which of course the students mentioned there earlier on. So that's the evolutionary path for cryptocurrencies, and the metaverse is for VR and AR. But from our point of view, I think the most interesting aspect of all this, even though those two things are growing and exploding in their own way, is where the two of them overlap, and where this thing called the metaverse can take advantage of and build on the foundationary technology or infrastructure of Web3, of the blockchain, and in particular that part of the blockchain at the moment called NFTs, but more of the blockchain as well. So again, students touched on fungibility, but let's just repeat, work being clear on what this idea of fungibility is. If I give you €1 and you give me your euro, those two things, they're fungible. We don't care which euro we have, they're exactly the same. So that's a tangible, fungible token. An intangible one is a digital currency like Bitcoin. We're all well used to the idea of non-fungible physical assets like art, and really it's only the original piece of art that's got the real value, not the copies. Even things, that might seem the same, like houses, we can't really, swap houses and be happy about that. Those things are non-fungible. But up to recently, we couldn't really do the same with digital art or digital files or media of any type, really, on the internet. It wasn't easy to claim and to know who had the authentic, certified ownership of the original copy of something. And now we can do that with non-fungible, intangible tokens. So again, digital fashions, and as mentioned, a company called Artifact has made a pretty penny out of creating limited edition digital sneakers that were only available in the digital world, in the metaverse space, to be put on an avatar's feet. And Nike bought them because I guess they see this as, again, being part of their sustainable fashion strategies. In fact, Nike have at least a few people with metaverse in their title at this stage, and there's a guy there called Andrew Schwartz. He's the director of metaverse engineering. I think we'll see a lot more of that. So that's digital shoes, but what about digital shirts, virtual shirts and jackets and hats and so on, and even virtual land? Can we buy and sell those as NFTs? Absolutely. So what we're seeing now is the emergence of what I would call heirs to the throne of Second Life. And Decentraland, which is the one here, is certainly one of those. And you'll see there that you can buy and sell digital goods and paraphernalia backed by the Ethereum blockchain. So as mentioned, the Ethereum blockchain is a very unsustainable blockchain due to the consensus mechanism they use there called proof of work. The good news is that the newer blockchains and even Ethereum itself will be moving to a different consensus algorithm called proof of stake, which is something like 99% less energy intensive. So that's good news for all of us in terms of NFTs and minting those. Other heirs to the throne of Second Life would be the likes of Somnium Space, and this is more of a native virtual reality, virtual world or metaverse experience. And what's really interesting to them is they're very explicit in saying that by use of the blockchain, they're actually setting out here to decouple the ownership of the company, Somnium Space, from the ownership of the digital assets that comprise their metaverse, including the land, including every digital three-dimensional object that goes into that land. So you'll see there in the bullet points that you are allowed and even encouraged as an owner of one of those assets in the form of an NFT to go onto a third-party marketplace and buy and sell those items without giving anything to Somnium Space, to Somnium Space. So I think, this is kind of a profound difference between the way these companies view a new decentralized Web3 and the idea that they're more like aggregating digital assets to create experiences, digital assets that other people own. Another example of that is a company called AdMix has partnered with Somnium Space to sell digital billboards as NFTs. So we're not just talking about fashion items or things you wear on an avatar, but actual things you can put in your virtual property, like this digital billboard. And AdMix has a partnership with companies that do ordinary out-of-home advertising on the places like Trafalgar Square, I guess, or Times Square, big digital advertising. They have partnerships with them, and you can actually show their ads in your Somnium Space parcel of land or in one of these other metaverses that they partner with and take a cut of that revenue. So again, you own this asset and you can actually build up a network of advertising billboards across multiple virtual worlds if you want to, or metaverses. And another example then of that idea, and probably one of the most important, is this idea of the avatar, because how we identify in these metaverses is a huge part of what people want to do. And so companies like Ready Player Me have specialized. They've spent 7 years developing artificial intelligence technology to take a photograph of you and convert that into a slightly cartoonish avatar that's highly optimized to run across multiple metaverse spaces. So they have a partnership, you'll see there, with Somnium Space too. So you can create your avatar in Ready Player Me and you can import that into Somnium Space. Again, Somnium Space don't want to claim ownership of these assets. So Ready Player Me would say that they are the passport for the metaverse. And again, the idea is that you can move across boundaries or across countries. If you think of a small m metaverse as being a country, you can move across multiple boundaries with your passport into other countries. And you can think of big M metaverse as being the globe. down at the bottom there, you'll see the idea also is that you will take your own digital fashions on that avatar that you own separately as NFTs from metaverse to metaverse. And not yet, but I'm sure down the line, you will also take your social graph with you. In other words, you will connect to your friends in a place like Ready Player Me, and you will take that social graph, that network of friends with you from one metaverse into the other, which again is completely different to the way we do things on social media today, like the way you're locked in to a platform like Facebook or a platform like Twitter, and you can't easily take your connections with you. So as mentioned again by the students, we're seeing Fashion Week coming to the Decentraland. You know, the fashion industry is really at the forefront, I think, in terms of innovating in this space. It has to be said, and again, because it's such a, I guess, a synergy there. And again, New York Fashion Week experimenting, and with mixed results, which is to be totally expected. We're all really learning, and as I say, these guys are spearheading that. Also spearheading it is the likes of Aileen Carville. She is the CEO and founder of Skimp, a Dublin company that's been doing augmented reality and virtual showrooms for a number of years, and now they're becoming an NFT merchant, an NFT marketplace. And that's because for Aileen, her company is all about sustainability of fashion. And again, the idea that we can satiate the need that we have to express our identity in the real world through real world and probably unsustainable fashion, maybe we can do that more so in the virtual world. And therefore, maybe we shouldn't be thinking about NFTs as being unsustainable so much as actually being, creating more sustainability or improving sustainability. So just a few quick examples then of other companies doing this kind of stuff is, I think one of the interesting things is the way they're bridging the digital and the physical, or what they call phygital. So the likes of Gap, you can buy the NFT for the digital hoodie, and then you can claim the physical version of that hoodie. I think Benetton are doing it the other way around, where if you buy a physical item of clothing, you get an NFT with it, and you can get the digital version of that to wear in your avatar. Gucci are doing that kind of thing, but they're also taking another step where they're actually buying virtual land, in this case in the Sandboxes, which is a kind of a competitor and another heir to the throne of Second Life, a competitor to Decentraland. And so Gucci are buying virtual land there because they want an actual virtual storefront. And again, I'm getting deja vu for Second Life with all of this, of course. So that's the fashion industry. I think also at the forefront of this is the music industry. So we're seeing, even though, you wouldn't think of Fortnite as being, I guess, a blockchain native metaverse, in many ways, they are very much the epitome of a metaverse. And, it's an extraordinary thing to have 12 million live viewers as avatars in an experience for an artist like Travis Scott. So I'm not saying I disagree with Tom's presentation earlier. It was really excellent. But I suppose in some ways I would say that the likes of Tom and myself are too old to say, that this isn't real life. I think for younger people, they don't seem to kind of create boundaries between what you might call real life and their online lives. They kind of, they bleed into one another. So, I think Roblox and the likes of those virtual worlds are another indicator of that. But you're seeing musicians then like DJ Steve Aoki, who's said that he's made more money through selling his music as NFTs in the last year, I think, than he's made in music advances for the previous 10 years. So he's really diving into the metaverse, into Web3, and he's actually creating his own metaverse. You might think that's a bit odd, when you can take these kind of big Second Life type metaverses like the Sandbox and Decentraland. But I actually think this is quite an indication of the way things will go. We'll have what I think are more boutique metaverses where one of the problems the metaverses have today, like the Sandbox and Decentraland, is you can go in there and actually feel like the place is almost empty. And it was that kind of chicken and egg thing that Second Life really suffered from as well, tumbleweed in many respects. But people like, celebrities and artists, influencers who have ready-made fan bases, and again, can create that graph, that social graph of fans in, utilities like Ready Player Me. I think they'll take those fan bases with them into boutique metaverse spaces, and those fans and those people will move seamlessly from one metaverse to another. So let's, step back, and again, I think a repetition of something that the student said earlier on, the bigger evolution, so we talked about the evolution from that the metaverse is of AR and VR, the Web3 is the evolution of blockchain. But the bigger picture evolution that's going on here is, I think, again, this Web 1 becoming Web 2, becoming Web 3. Web 1 was a very decentralized web, which was great, but it meant that we needed search engines. So they were the big winners, the likes of Google in the early days, to find that information. And very few people published to the web because it was hard, Web 1. It was much easier just to read, so it was called the read web. Web 2 was the read-write web, because these big platforms, these social media platforms, made it much easier to now publish and to write to the web. Web 3, promises to give us the best of both worlds, because Web 2 was really at the expense of centralizing the web. Web 3 promises to decentralize the web again, just like, that really is the magic of blockchain. It is a very distributed and decentralized protocol or infrastructure. And at the same time, I guess the big change is that we're now getting what we call the read-write ownership or own web. So finally, for the first time, through the mechanisms of NFTs and the likes on the blockchain, we can finally claim and prove and retain ownership of all our digital assets and all our data. And then the winners look like they're going to be the companies that aggregate your data for experiences. So the likes of OpenSea is one of the big aggregators of your NFTs in an NFT marketplace. But we saw earlier that the likes of Somnium Space is essentially an aggregator of 3D NFTs to create a gaming experience or to create a metaverse. So I guess that's it. Thank you for listening, and I hope that's been of use.
That's great. Thanks a million, James. Great Second Life reminder there. Thanks for covering the whole fungible, non-fungible, intangible, phygital question. I've kind of been avoiding that one, but it's much clearer to me now. Thank you. That was great. I know our students, they'll definitely be creating new avatars on Ready Player Me if they haven't started doing it already on the side. So it's really, really interesting application there. I think that's going to go across the different platforms. So James is actually a guest speaker on the UX Design Masters on Friday. So many thanks for taking time out this evening to share your views, James. The students and myself are looking forward to catching up with you on Friday morning. Just on a side note, if anyone in the audience is, if you are, a lot of our students are remote workers, but if you are interested in doing that UX Masters course, it's a postgraduate diploma / Masters in UX Design and Applied Innovation. It is 1 day a week, and it's over 1 year. But if you're interested in it, just jump onto the LYIT website and sign up for our September intake. So let's move on now to our panel discussion. We've a great panel lined up for you. And this evening we've got Tom's going to sit on with us here. It's Tom Houston. We've also got Joe Dunleavy, VP and Head of Innovation at Endava. Can't wait to hear what Joe's opinions on this are. We've also got Mark Porter. Mark is instructional designer and learning tech support at LYIT here. And he's been the guy that we've been torturing over the last while about everything VR over the last 6 weeks or so. Then we've also got Hannah Dahari. Hannah is a student on the UX course, and she's graphic designer with Learning Pool in Derry. Chris Gavin, fair play to Chris. Chris, I think it's 4 a.m. in Kuala Lumpur at the moment. Chris is one of our further away students, but he's the head of innovation and digital tech at Peninsula International School over in Kuala Lumpur. So we'll be interested to see. Chris is also a DJ in his spare time, so it'll be interesting to see what he's got to say. And then we've also got Caroline Gilliland. Caroline is based up in Derry as well with Allstate, and she's the chat and chatbot manager with Allstate there. So let me crack on here, and I've got a few questions for the panel that'll get us moving. So I've got a kind of a question for each of the panel, and if anyone wants to jump in at any stage, they can as well. So I'll start off with Mark Porter. Mark, You're involved with our students from a VR learning support point of view in their current emerging tech module. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that you're encountering and where you see the potential benefits?
Sure, Patrick, thanks. So for education in Ireland, there's lots of new processes to sort of deal with regards extended reality and the implementation of it. For the course that we're trying to set up, you have the hardware side of it and the setup of it. We're running the Oculus Quest 2 headset because it's sort of regarded as the best experience in VR at the minute. With that comes its own set of problems. You have the whole Facebook sign-in side of it. You have how you can share apps across different headsets. We're sort of cheating slightly, where we've got a third-party management software that we can log all the headsets into, and we can run the apps from that. Now, we have encountered problems, and we've thankfully overcame them last week when we got most of our students online and spatial. So, there's lots of interesting things there with regards to hardware and setup, hardware, software setup, but the biggest thing for me is the user experience side. It's introducing VR to people who have never been in VR or never had any semblance of an experience like that. And it's, you're trying to teach them all these new concepts in relation to the hardware that they're using, the setup of the hardware. And then when they get into the applications themselves, there's all these new paradigms that they have to try and learn. When you think about when we were first introduced touchscreens, you had pinch to zoom and rotate, multiple finger swipe. You have all these different paradigms now you're introduced in VR when you're thinking about like spatial interaction and desktop interaction mixed. So it's quite an interesting problem to solve. You need many different approaches. And I suppose one of the biggest things from our point of view is that because we are working remotely, it's very difficult to see what people are doing and what they're not doing to try and help troubleshoot and get them up to speed, and so that everybody's at the same sort of level of experience. But it's been very interesting learning all this. The potential benefit, I think there's massive potential in education for the use of extended reality, and that's from virtual reality to augmented reality. One of the paradigms in teaching is practice-based learning, and there's so many. When you think of engineering, civil engineering, nursing, any of those disciplines where it requires practice, there's lots of use cases for VR that they're not even created yet, and I think we're missing out there. For example, if you took nursing and what happened in relation to COVID for student nurses, and then not being able to actually get out in placement and missing out on all those practical skills. There are some institutes in England that try to bring in VR training with regards OMS, which is Oxford Medical Simulation, and it was actually quite successful. So it was a bit akin to pilots learning to fly. Typically, they do a lot of hours in VR, accruing their time there, and then they go out and fly planes because of the danger factor. And it's no different for the likes of nurses. They are dealing with people's lives in the real world. So I think there's a lot of benefit there. I think there's also a lot of benefit, and James sort of alluded to this in relation to communication. It's very hard to engage with people on a desktop. I think in VR you have some semblance or more semblance of reality. For example, the last day when we were in VR and we were actually able to high five, you have all those different interactions that you can sort of do or recreate. Even the likes of putting your hand up in class. When it's done remotely, it's a wee icon that pops up on screen. The lecturer can miss that, whereas in VR, a person can actually put their hand up and you can see visually that they want to ask the question or engage, So I think there's lots of interesting things that could happen in relation to education,
Yeah, I think even in real life, some people still aren't ready for a high five again. The fact of actually shaking hands or something like that there, it's still, even when you're seeing when they lifted the masks ruling, and some people still prefer to wear them, some don't. So it's going to take time, that side of things. But definitely when we were talking about the pandemic, that's when the big shift happened. When we brought that course particularly 100% online, and the thinking was in VR that we would try to enhance the classroom experience even further. I think we're not far off that. Like it's still early days. Like definitely, like the first 6 weeks of this module has been very much kind of getting the headsets and more or less getting people onboarded. Even that process of putting the thing on your head, finding your space and finding how to use those controls. There is a learning curve in it. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, like definitely. There's a learning curve, and as I says before, there's all these experiences that people just have to get used to. There's people who, when they go into that virtual world, it'll completely freak them out, and it's just by spending time in it will they get used to that. One of the things that definitely happens in VR is losing your orientation because you sort of get immersed, and that's why again. In relation to something Tom said earlier in his, I think VR is going to be the leader in this, not AR. And why I say that is because it's going to be more of a use case experience where you can put it on for an hour and leave it off. Like the wearing glasses all day thing, I think, that's ultimately why Google Glass sort of suffered in that regard, because people don't want to be wearing glasses all day, especially people who don't have visual impairment problems. Whereas, when it's for teaching, in the case where you're only on for an hour, you put your headset on, you take it off. Like the paradigm in relation for VR and gaming is massive, and I think it's one of the leaders in VR. When you consider, like Oculus outsold Xbox in relation to console sales, and the amount of games and apps that are being developed as AAA titles for Oculus is crazy, and they're sort of the leaders in software development in that regard, and I think we all have to try and catch up with that, with the rest of the experiences,
Definitely. I can see there's some questions starting to fire in here as well, and some of them are coming up within the next couple of questions as well. So I'll cover what I can from those questions, and then perhaps we can do a shared kind of response to these with the panel afterwards as well. So let me go to one of the students, Hannah. How you doing, Hannah? Just a couple of questions for you then. How are you enjoying the VR classroom modules so far? And just on your own level, do you think you'll engage with the metaverse going forward, and how do you think?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it anyways. I feel like I'm adapting to it quite quickly, but I think that's because personally I'm an active learner, so I learn by doing. So by sitting and actually putting the headset on and getting the demonstrations from Mark, I was really quick to pick it up, and I think it's really interesting learning new technology, especially when it's an emerging tech module. I don't think you see that really anywhere else in Ireland anyways at the minute, so I think that's something really unique to our course. The question of engaging myself with the metaverse in the future, I think I will, because for the group projects I did the section about NFTs and digital art, so I've actually started kind of like looking into that myself, and the money that people are making is crazy. Taking CryptoPunks for example, they were the first original set of NFTs, and they're selling for up to $500,000 per piece, and they just look like little Minecraft characters. So I just think it's crazy. And then now looking into the cryptocurrency side of it as well, I was doing my weekly online shopping, and I noticed that the button for BitPay has actually started showing up. So people are using this every day, using their cryptocurrency that they're making in the metaverse to do their normal Amazon shop. So I think if you don't get in at this stage, you could be really losing out. And I think it's so easy, not easy, but you'd be really lucky to make a lot of money creating NFTs and digital art. So that's definitely something I'm going to be looking into more, is the digital art side of it, and looking in how to create NFTs and how to sell them and different things. So I think the digital art side of it would be really interesting to get into.
Yeah, definitely. And I think within your job as well as a graphic designer, there's so much space for user interface design as well. I think, yeah, I was just thinking back there to your presentations as well, and the team presentations. And I know you were kind of dipping your toes into a completely different area that you hadn't looked at before. How was that? working kind of online with the team producing that video?
I think anyways, working as a collective, looking at the 4 different areas, it really clarified what the metaverse meant for us anyways. Instead of focusing in on one area and kind of getting really deep into that single area, we were able to completely get our heads around what the metaverse can actually give us and the opportunities it can provide on simple everyday levels. So for Chris, for example, he's a DJ. He can sell music in the metaverse, you know, different things like that. For everyday people, they have the opportunities to make quite a lot of money, which is, I think, is a really big opportunity.
Thanks, Hannah. Great segue now to go and chat to Chris. Thanks for that, Hannah. So we'll go over to Chris Gavin. Chris is one of our international students, and he's based in Kuala Lumpur. And thanks for getting up early or staying up late, whichever it is, Chris. You're involved in digital learning support in education and in the music industry. Can you give us some insight into your engagement in this space and how things are progressing for you?
Well, I mean, in terms of within international schools, I first started using sort of AR around about 9 years ago. And the question I got posed to me is, how does it make things better? So I've seen sort of evolution this last 9 years of AR and VR. I am actually trying to push virtual learning at the moment. Now, some of the challenges I've always faced is sort of accessibility, really. You know, VR headsets can be costly. And there's probably always something a school needs more than, say, a VR headset, you know, where the budgeting constraints come into it. So some of the challenges I found is sort of lack of equipment, pose challenges, lack of investment, and sort of having suitable content. You know, I don't think sort of this Oculus perhaps would be something I would use in school with students with sort of data privacy and so on. I've used this one set called Class VR, which actually uses similar software, which is more suitable for sort of young children, and it's like subject and school specific content. So I have found sort of really benefits in using that. But what I found difficulties, I think sort of Mark touched on it as well, is changing the mindset in getting sort of staff and teachers to embrace it. Whenever there's something new, you know, teachers are really busy. You pile something on there, what's a bit more intricate, you might find sort of resistance in there too. But I mean, I do think sort of virtual learning is sort of the future of education. I think as it becomes more accessible and the sort of costing comes down, and schools will be able to embrace it more. And from my experience, it does make learning more immersive, more personalized, and most importantly, more differentiated. It sort of brings all those learning styles into it. So I do sort of feel like, you know, if you're sort of teaching a concept about history, and, you know, you've got a class, you can take them there, you know, rather than sort of looking at a video or sort of looking at a textbook or something like that. Anything that makes learning more realistic and makes it more valuable will only have a positive effect on students' education going forward.
Good stuff. What about yourself as a DJ? Do you see room for VR and metaverse within that area?
Yeah, I mean, I've DJed for like 20 years now, and I've been making and releasing music actually since the sort of back end of the vinyl days. I first released my first track about when I was like 18, so I'm 37 now, so 19 years ago. So I've sort of seen how the sort of industry's changed. So you can find most of my music on all the major download sites and streaming sites. But obviously with downloads and streaming was sort of a loss in revenue for artists, basically, because even if you say on Spotify, and you can find my music on there with 5 million streams, but the actual money that you earn from those streams is quite small. In fact, an artist will only make maybe like 10-11% of the profits the music makes. So again, the industry's sort of become stagnated. So sort of speaking to different industry people, there's actually sort of talk that the metaverse could sort of create more revenue streams for artists. We've already seen sort of virtual concerts taking place in Fortnite with Ariana Grande making sort of almost like $20 million from that concert, Travis Scott. So if these artists can do these virtual concerts, reach a bigger fan base, more fan engagement, NFT merchandise, this should create more opportunities. I also sort of see like collaboration as well. What this COVID period has told us is distance has been a real issue. Now, I always find music industry to be one of the sort of front of the queue in innovation. So for the last 2 years, for example, artists have sort of been collaborating, working on projects via Zoom, for example. So imagine if you could sort of take move away from the physical studio into this sort of virtual studio, and how that could sort of enhance collaboration. Even sort of talking about virtual concerts, you could get an artist sort of touring virtually without leaving their home. That'd be quite, an interesting. We've also seen sort of like Sony Music and Warner Music are already investing in the metaverse. Warner launching its own music themed world in the sandbox, which again is sort of really interesting. But sort of when I put the Oculus on, one thing I found was sound quality. If you're familiar with sort of music, making music, DJing, sound is one of the key attributes. So if you are attending a virtual concert or a virtual show, or you are making music in the metaverse, how can we enhance that sound experience? I'm already aware that sort of the software around Oculus is already speaking with sort of Soundtrap and working with how they can improve the sound experience when you're in the metaverse. So that'd be sort of really interesting to see how that plays out, that we can improve that sound quality. Now, a lot of this stuff, it sort of won't happen overnight. There's going to be a lot of obstacles. Licensing, for example. If there's music in there, how is it licensed? How is it redistributed? That'd be also interesting to play out. And also safeguarding as well. We have issues online with safeguarding. We have issues going to a physical nightclub or a physical event with making it safe for the attendees. I'm a father to 2 young daughters. How is it going to be safe for them if they, in the future, attended this virtual concert or this virtual event? How would it be made safe for them? So that'd be also interesting to see how it plays out. Because I always find sort of first priority is profits, and one of the last priorities is sort of safeguarding. So again, it'd be interesting how that sort of rolls out. As we know, the metaverse is still growing. Is it just a fad? Does it have longevity? I'm not too sure, but it'll sort of be interesting how it plays out. Yeah.
Great insight there. I think I didn't realize you were 5 million streams, man. We're talking about having an end of year show. I think we've got our DJ booked. If you're available, I'd like to book you in now. I'll sort you a coin or something later on. Yeah. I don't know. We usually have an end of year show in the RCC Centre in Letterkenny. I think we're going online again this year. I'm just wondering if there's potential for a metaverse show. We might even look at that. You never know. Okay, so let's go on to the final of our students here tonight before we move on to the industry questions. I see a few more of them coming up. I'll cover them in the next stage. But I'd like to go to Caroline Gilliland. Caroline is with Allstate and based up in Derry. And Caroline, can you see where there could be issues engaging in a shared virtual space? For example, in around safety. You coming up against anything like that?
Absolutely. So for companies, they'll need to be very stringent on how they use shared virtual spaces or any vended solution, really. They really need to assess the types of content that they'll share online and who can see it and for how long. So they'll need to consider things like data encryption, as well as proactive compliance and risk activities for both public and private metaverses, like Tom talked about earlier. And we know that in the industry currently, external to metaverses, many companies faced issues when they were forced to work from home around sharing information. So for example, if you're working in your kitchen and a family member walks past your screen, they could easily read customer information, and an employee might write down maybe a note of a long card number on a piece of paper just so that they can type it in slowly and double check it's correct. But now that card information is sitting in someone's bin somewhere. Or even if the employee recites your card number back to you to ensure it's correct, anyone in that room could have overheard what they said and noted it down. So, they now have access to that information. And that's an issue that's happening in the here and now. So what companies need to realize is that they're not solely buying into metaverse. They're buying into all the technology that sits within the Web 3.0 that we talked about earlier. So they're buying into cryptocurrency, they're buying into blockchain and so much more. But most of what we've talked about tonight has been around larger companies. And I kind of want to take a pause and think about those smaller businesses as well. They need to realize that this is a lot broader than just floating around in a metaverse. They really need to start rethinking their business as a whole. We know that small businesses struggle in keeping up with content creation to stay relevant to customers on social media, like James touched upon. There's that fear of missing out. So what does that mean for them now to have to also stay relevant to the technology behind it all? 3.0 is filtering into our lives, but I have major concerns over the burnout of small companies trying to keep up with the technological rat race. So for those that aren't born into Web 3.0, perhaps they may not feel the burnout as quickly, like we've talked about. But for those of us who have been there through all those other web stages, it can be exhausting staying up to date in those advancements. So I feel that there is a major opportunity for user experience and how we make this technology accessible and digestible to reduce user burnout of technology advancement. Just like Ford touched upon earlier, even just getting people onboarded. And all of that, of course, is without even touching on the huge opportunity for the talent and skills required for our future workforce. But that, we could talk about that all night.
That's great, Caroline. You've just the whole safety issue thing. I think is it's important, and it reminds me of the first day that we were on. Actually, I think it was the first class we jumped into spatial on the desktop in VR, and the first thing that happened when I just wasn't expecting somebody else to be in there. That I think it was a Japanese student or something came up and started asking questions and talking to us in one of the virtual shared spaces. So you could just imagine if somebody was going in there for the first time that that there is serious issues there around safety. The other thing as well, I think, was pointed out in the class was that when we were in spatial as a group, that we were being recorded. It wasn't until one of the students came back afterwards and said, actually, everything we've just talked about today has been recorded in spatial. So thanks very much for that, Caroline. Let's go back now to Tom. That was one of our speakers earlier on. Tom, so as a company that develops bespoke VR and AR applications for industry, are you seeing the metaverse having influence on customer requirements? And if so, how?
We are. I mean, we're starting to see, it's probably a bigger question than that even, and it touches on some of the stuff even Mark and Chris talked about. I mean, the biggest impact on our business has actually been Facebook, Meta. The release of the Oculus Quest and the Quest 2 headsets. It's phenomenal pieces of equipment for 300 quid. Just incidentally, just one of the things that Mark talked about there about having to have the Facebook account signed in and for each of the individual headsets. Oculus or Meta then released a version, they called it Oculus for Business. And you don't have to have a Facebook sign in to do that. And it's 500 quid more expensive. And I've seen a really good article about it saying people have often wondered how much your privacy is worth or how much your data is worth to Facebook. Well, now you know it's 500 quid. Because they're not able to harvest that and get sales through Oculus, they're charging an extra 500 quid. So that's created a huge momentum. People are seeing their kids buying these headsets and now asking, well, can we use this for business? And still, I mean, I've sounded tonight like I'm a bit down on VR, and I'm not. I mean, about 90% of our business, 95% of our business probably is virtual reality. I think that certainly is in the short term. I think that's going to continue to be the way. What we are seeing and where the metaverse has had a real impact is people talking now about how they collaborate. And this is where I will sound a bit negative because I go back to my point about it has to add value. It has to, and that's usually the first question we ask is, what is it you want to do with this? And a lot of the time you get people, well, you want to do whatever with it. And you go, well, how do you do that currently? And they tell you how they currently do it. And you say, well, how is VR going to improve that? And they actually don't have an answer. And it's because it's cool, because it's new, it's because they want to do it in virtual reality. And so there's a big conversation needs to be had around, again, adding value to it. And I think Chris made a great point when he was talking about, teaching students and being able to bring them to a point in history. You can't do that in augmented reality. That's virtual reality. And I think as we start to understand the benefits and the different features that virtual reality, augmented reality have, they're very different, with very different features and benefits, and it's making proper use out of that. So I'm kind of rambling a bit, but I think that, yeah, we see a lot of companies coming along talking about the metaverse, not really understanding what it is, not really knowing what benefits they want out of it. And our big kind of conversation with them is around, okay, well, what's the value you want? What are you trying to do as a business? And how can we make that happen within VR, AR? And then how can you then share that experience so that other people within your company, can make use of it? The funny thing is, what we're actually starting to see more and more is not so much that people want to collaborate, at least at this point, live in a shared metaverse, but what they want is shared spaces where information can be exchanged. So we're, for example, going into a building, if you like, a virtual reality building where people can use traditional training methods, watch videos, use e-learning, but all in VR, where they do have that privacy, where they can kind of shut themselves off. But within that, to be able to have access to notice boards, to video updates, to things that are, it's just a very modern version of, now people aren't in the office. How do you read the notice board? Because you can do it in email, but this is a more interactive way of doing it. So it's the metaverse has certainly had a driver in our business, but I think the wider driver is just the way that technology and Meta as a company have kind of driven this whole product.
Just wondering on that then, do you see that your current client base changing, or do you see new clients coming on, if you know what I mean, because of this here? Is your client base changing or evolving?
Both. I mean, I think that we get a lot of repeat business, and we're certainly seeing those customers evolving. I think that what we're seeing is how people are starting to make use of resources that they had, and how can they make better use of those in a virtual space. So again, when we created this room, we actually called it training room, because we're not very good at naming things. And literally, it looks like something from IKEA. It has a video screen in it, and it was because one of our customers said, we have this whole library of 2D videos, and we want to be able to make use of them. We don't have any meeting rooms. People are watching these videos on their laptops. And I remember I used to work for a couple of big multinationals, and we would get videos sent to us, and we had to watch them on diversity or health and safety or whatever it happened to be. And you'd play them in the corner and you'd mute them, and at the end of it, it would look like you've watched them. Never watched any of it. And I think that there was cases in, even in Northern Ireland, there was a case of a large company there where directors were prosecuted for corporate manslaughter because of an accident that happened in their business. And one of the arguments that they gave was, well, look, these people were trained. They watched the videos. They signed to say they were trained. And one of the arguments back was, well, how did you know they understood it? And that was a driver for this particular company to say, we have all these videos. We want to make sure people have watched it, but we also want to add a quiz in. Now, the other thing that we found, which was quite bizarre, is sort of a pet subject. We've done a bit of work with UCLA, University of Northern California, and also with trying to think of the name of it, a Japanese university as well. And there's been a huge amount of work done now on the psychological effects of VR. And what happens apparently when you put a VR headset on is normally your brain has a huge amount of tricks that it plays on you. And the easiest way to test this is if somebody closes, you kind of cover one eye, you will see kind of the corner of your nose. And if you close the other eye, you'll see the other corner of your nose. If you open both eyes, you don't see your nose. But you do, but your brain just blanks it out. And there's lots of other things that your brain does using sight to basically fool you during the day. So all these different tricks. When you put a VR headset on, basically what happens is your brain freaks out. It doesn't have all of these things that it normally does. It can't use those anymore. And so it goes into this mode, and they've done a lot of studies in terms of the synapses that start firing. And your brain goes into this mode where you basically becomes a bit of a sponge, where it's trying to extract as much information as possible. So when you talk about education in VR, even if you're doing traditional education in VR, they estimate that you'll probably, at the end of it, you will probably pick up about 25 to 30% more information and retain it for longer, just because it's in VR, even if it's traditional content. So yeah, there's been a lot of work done around that, and I think that it's I think as we start to go forward, I think our customers are starting to realize that, and they're starting to look at, well, we have spent tens of thousands of pounds on traditional either e-learning or video content. How do we make use of that in VR? How do we make it more useful for people?
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Tom. I'm conscious here, and I wanna bring in the man who's been waiting patiently in the wings, Joe Dunleavy. Thanks, Joe. And there's a few questions that I wanted to ask you. I'll start off with the first one, I suppose. Joe's head of innovation at Endava, client services tech company. Joe, just on what you've seen tonight, I suppose, and on your own thoughts, what do you think some of the opportunities could be for some of your clients in the future? Sorry, you're on mute there, Joe.
Suppose it would help if I took it off mute. All right. Sorry about that, Mark. Thanks very much for the opportunity as well. So just to echo, I mean, a lot of people have covered. I won't go over ground that people have covered. I think a couple of things though that kind of come to mind from a client perspective, and Tom mentioned it. It's understanding why you want to use VR, AR, or jump into the metaverse. You know, there's a cool factor. We're in a bit of a bubble, particularly of interest with Meta and other things that this is putting on people's radar. In which case, we're getting clients coming to us asking to be part of this, or maybe not a good, fully understood reason why. But there's definite benefits. They're being covered here. I think Tom covered it brilliantly, the impact on education. Education is something that impacts pretty much all industries. If you think of even financial services and people wanting to know where to invest maybe their money or how a pension works, for example, that might be something that you could educate them all day long on a webinar. But if you put them into like a virtual experience with an avatar, particularly when like the coming together technologies like chatbots, user experiences, and the likes, it can have a real impact in holding for people, being something that impacts them. It keeps coming, more and more interest in it. I think we're probably underestimating the long-term impact and maybe overestimating. I think it's the Mary's law. Like in the next 3 years, I think people think we're going to be working in the metaverse. I'm not sure that's going to be the case, but to make it kind of sticky, I think the education theme has been covered well. It's a really strong point of the value proposition. COVID has changed a lot in that the element of where we are and how we do what we do and how we interact. It's fast forwarded. The course that you're doing here and the fact that people from Colin Power is on the course is fantastic. I think that has been definitely brought forward by COVID. So you're seeing that as part of clients coming to us with more interest in what they can do and how they can show up differently. I'll give you a real world example and then kind of move on to the next question. We had a situation, and one of the clients I can speak about is public information from an Endava perspective. Volkswagen were launching the ID3 at a motor show in Germany. Literally the weeks before COVID hit, everyone went into lockdown, and they had this spanking brand new ID3 car that they wanted to showcase, and they were like, it was an in-person experience. They turned to us very quickly and said, listen, what can you do? And within I think it was an 8 to 10 week period, we built out that entire experience in a virtual reality, made it available through online channels. But basically, we're able to somewhat help them save the day, and that all of this experience, all this opportunity that was to be in person, was still able to happen. And it was like a formal launch of the ID3 car. So, those use cases will be there. I think, I suppose, it's to Tom's point, getting the right ones. And our world is about understanding and helping the person understand the value before you kind of just go and build something, because it's not always a good answer.
Yeah, it's definitely a quick response seems to be the name of the game there. Just on as a second point then, before the final question, are there any patterns or trends you're seeing in terms of areas of interest from clients?
Yeah, definitely the how do you show up to your customers differently? So now that digital transformation's kind of been accelerated, I mentioned it already with COVID, you could argue things have been brought forward maybe 5 to 10 years. Differentiating yourself in the marketplace is a trend that's becoming more and more. So, it used to be your website was an expectation. You also have to have a YouTube channel and the social media channels. Now it's also starting to include how can you show up differently, how can you interact with customers differently. So that trend is something that virtual reality can show up. People mentioned it here as well. There's a lot of overlap and integration now of technologies. You're talking about NFTs, blockchain, and the likes. How are they incorporated into a metaverse? We are starting to see as well things you can't ignore. So there's are we in a hype cycle or not? Not fully sure where I stand on that, but we work with companies across various different industries, and you're starting to see patterns like sales, particularly online sales. Like you're talking, it was mentioned already, real estate. Real estate being sold in a metaverse is more than a concept in that you've got things being sold for tens of thousands of euros or tens of thousands of typically crypto, some sort of cryptocurrency. So you can't ignore that. So for me, and I think it's a trend that from a retail perspective in particular, what's a brand that is a physical brand like a Nike shoe or a Coca-Cola drink? How is that applicable in the metaverse? You can't, if you're a large company, ignore that the metaverse or take the chance that it does not become what everyone expects it will become. So what is your relevance of your brand on a metaverse, and how are you going to show up in that experience? Like, what's the equivalent of a virtual Coke, and how will Coca-Cola be part of the metaverse? And just the final point I would say, and this is from a trend perspective, I think a lot of people talk about taking what we do today in the physical world and bolting it or moving it into a virtual reality. I think from an arts perspective and that industry, I think we need to be maybe thinking a bit broader. What is it that the metaverse, like, you can't jump off a physical building in real life and not get injured. The same does not apply in a virtual sense. So, thinking about the trend of let's not limit ourselves in the experience of the past in terms of what it can open up in terms of creativity. And then certainly there's a load of people out there who are interested in how you make money on the same.
There's a picture of myself and yourself from about 4 or 5 years ago at the hackathon, the fintech hackathon for Primerica, and it's us doing cheers with virtual pints. I don't know if you remember.
I do. I remember it.
Yeah, it was virtual pints of Guinness. I suppose they probably exist now. They probably just don't taste the same, but I'd say we're probably not. Guinness are bound to be all over this. I'm sure they're probably in the metaverse somewhere.
All of the big brands are for it because, again, they can't afford not to be. And I think it also touches upon which metaverse is going to win out here. Meta and Facebook are putting an awful lot of energy, time, and significant sums of money into it. That's the problem, is if you're the unlucky chap or person to buy the real estate in the metaverse, you think it's going to win out and it's not even relevant in the next 2 or 3 years. There will be as much opportunity as there'll be plenty of people burned in the next couple of years, unfortunately, too.
That's what I was going to ask you. I'd say the final question from a tech perspective, is there one company that you think will play a big part in the success or adoption of the metaverse?
It's been one that comes to mind that's been touched upon is Oculus, right? Oculus has been acquired by Facebook, now Meta, a number of years ago for a couple of $1 billion. The significance of what they've done is they've massively reduced the cost of the experience. It's a bit like the first time a DVD player comes out and it was €1,000. Eventually it goes all the way down to €50 and everybody gets it. That crossing the chasm was mentioned in one of the videos by the students. For me, the barrier point to something like VR right now has been headsets and the cost of them, and particularly the quality of the experience. They talk about degrees of motion or 6 degrees of freedom within a headset. What the Oculus Quest offers today, only 2-3 years ago, was €1,800 because it was achievable through a VR headset actually physically connected to a high performance graphic laptop. So the barrier there was $2,000 for you to have that experience. It's now down to $299. It'll continue to go down. But the one, and it was a question I saw come in as well, Apple's headset, and it's well publicized when it's come, so the worst kept secret in the industry. But for me, Apple accelerate, and so does the phone providers. Once they embed VR, AR directly into them, the Apple experience will massively accelerate. So although we've talked a lot about Meta and also Oculus and what they've done, which is ultimately Meta, Apple is the one for me. When they put their heart into something, we know how that goes. the price point will be expensive, but the quality of the experience will probably be something that we haven't even thought of yet. So for me, Apple, they're no dark horse. It's a clear one, but for me, they're the one to watch because it's taken them this long to get it out. I can imagine when it comes out, it was a bit like when the iPad or when the iPad came out. Everyone was like, "What problem does this solve?" And they had completely created a new almost industry within an industry. So it'll be interesting to see. They're the dark horse, if you can call Apple a dark horse.
Good man, Joe. Thanks for your time. So just for the whole group, I have a couple of questions just as we wrap up. So I suppose that the negative elements they're unavoidable, especially at this early stage. There's a real, I've heard Wild West said a few times now, but there's a definite Wild West feel about it. So in that vein, I wonder, do we need a sheriff? And if so, what problems need to be addressed sooner rather than later? That's to anyone on the panel that'd like to jump in.
Do you want me to start on that one?
Yeah,
I actually did I did a post on this a few weeks ago on LinkedIn, actually. I mean, it sounds really bizarre, and as a man, and this is awful, but I laughed at it when I seen it as well, where there was reports of women going into metaverse and shared spaces, and someone complained they were groped in VR, and you kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, then you read it, and you realize the experience that, and as more than one person went through, was horrendous. Abuse being shouted at them, different things happening, and what frustrates me about things like that is the fact that Facebook, or Meta as they are now as a business, literally harvest almost every single piece of information, and yet so they know exactly what's going on, and their solution to it was to put a 2-foot circle around everyone so you can't get too close. It's a ridiculous solution to it. They know if someone reports something like that happening in a shared space, that can very easily be flagged up. It can be very easily found out who did it and what happened. And then there needs to be repercussions in the real world. Because anyone who acts like that in a virtual world is almost certainly either doing it in the real world or would like to do it in the real world. And I think that companies like Meta have to really step up and start taking responsibility. They create these platforms, they allow people to go into them, and then they kind of wash their hands off it when bad things happen. So yeah, I think there needs to be a sheriff. Not sure who that sheriff should be, but I think the implications, if events happen that are serious enough, then there should be implications in the real world, not just the virtual world.
Yeah,
I think
sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to kind of jump on the back of that as well, 1 in 5 users of the internet are children. And I know, Porg, we have discussed multiple times about the instances that have happened around Club Penguin. And Club Penguin was Disney branded. And it was where people had avatars that were all penguin based, and they went in and they played little mini games. But it was the same type of experience, but it was, and similarly, like we've talked about, there was a huge rise in the number of people playing in this Club Penguin world because of COVID, because they had nothing else to do. But it also then meant that people started sharing inappropriate messages. They were asking for all sorts of inappropriate things from people who were out there this platform was for children. It was for people under the age of 15. So, what are we doing to protect our children in this environment? It's so much more than just we're all adults. This is just how the world is. We need to be looking at how do we stop that happening? Because, the same as what Tom was saying, it happens in the real world too. And if a brand as big as Disney, who people trust, especially with children, if they can't do it, they're still going through legal battles around that. What hope is there for some of the other big brands to be the sheriff?
Thanks, Caroline. Joe, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I won't echo too much. Just one thing I would say is, and I think it goes back to not just the metaverse, but things like artificial intelligence and bias and what we're seeing there as well. I don't think, and this is the cynic in me, I don't think we can leave big tech, who earn a fortune of money, up to be self-policed. So I don't have a good answer outside of, but I do think it's going to require some level of legal and government intervention. Unfortunately, technology is usually quicker than compliance and legal can ever catch up with. But I do think that we are going to have to see government intervention in some form, or at least some sort of kind of global agreement around holding companies accountable, because it's just we're in the middle of it now. We're in the middle of what's happening in the Ukraine, and Facebook throwing their hands up saying, oh, freedom of speech. That's not good enough, and I don't think it will be the case. And we have to do a better job, just as a society, in terms of people being good to each other, but also when we have bad actors in there. I do think we can't, personally, I don't think we can rely on companies to do it. I think we are going to have some level of, now it's about the right level of policing, and I don't think we want any, there is freedoms of speech things and stuff we do need to be careful of, but there's a balance there. And for me, the balance will ensure that I think somebody's going to have to keep the large tech companies in check.
Can I say something there, Parek, too?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a slightly different slant. Like, when you think of the amount of design resources that are on the web, free to download, from, for example, Thingiverse, it's the piracy of that, the reselling of that, and the repackaging of that, in NFTs, and people making money off the back of other people who don't even realize what an NFT is. I think there's a massive problems going to occur there with the amount of resources that are online available freely to download.
Thanks, Mark. Just a final question then for the panel. What will the metaverse experience look like in 2032? Who's brave enough to take that one on?
I'm hoping Ready Player One.
I think if you look at how far we've come, and I think that you can look at what is kind of state of the art right now in our industry, and you're not talking about Oculus, you're talking about companies like Vario, who have stuff that, when you see it, it's ridiculous. You're looking at this, it's what's referred to as mixed reality. It's no longer virtual reality or augmented reality. It truly is mixed reality, and you can't tell the difference. You can't tell what's real and what's not. And I think when you see the processing power that Apple in particular are starting to bring out in desktops and mobile phones, they did a product launch yesterday and brought out a chip that is a variation of something in a mobile phone, and it's destroying, in terms of processing power, destroying $30,000-$40,000 Intel based workstations. In 10 years time, that's where the computing power is going to be in a headset. And all of a sudden that opens up massive amounts of possibilities in terms of reality. And I think you will start to see Vario levels of quality. So anyone who hasn't seen Vario, it's VARJO. There's a load of videos on YouTube. It's incredible stuff. But that sort of capability will be in a mobile headset. And I think when you take that level of reality into the metaverse, where it's truly mixed reality, I think that's going to be an incredible position to be in. That's not really an answer, I know, but it's,
I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
All right, Mark. So I'll try to keep it brief. I think, to try to. We talked about the positives, the negatives, and the pros and cons of it. And I do think if we try to take the positive view, because I generally think if you look back at the last 20, 30 years, technology typically outweighs the value of it outweighs the negativity. So just, to fast forward to 2032 and to think about what the art of the possible with this, I for one, I'm really excited about what the metaverse could look like. It could be an ultimate leveler for the world in terms of opportunity. Like, think about what it would look like to be employed within a metaverse. It potentially could no longer matter where you are in the world, as long as you've got access to it, for how much it can benefit you and your family, which I think, for one, I think that could be really, really powerful. In addition to that as well, I do think, there's the green agenda and the whole area of what we've been talking about with the green economy and all the challenges that we have and all the targets we need to meet. Again, I do really think if you think years ago, before COVID, people flew to New York for a meeting and flew home again. Whereas I think COVID said that is ridiculous, and I don't think a CFO will ever sign off on a flight to something for that example. So if you think of 2032 with COVID and what VR can bring, it can help with the green agenda as well. So from the positives perspective, I think there could be a lot there, albeit some challenges that we need to address as well. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, you're grand. I was just going to say, I like to think of it from a point of view of progress. You know, when you look back 100 years ago, you had radio, then you had TV, and then you had like video and DVDs. Now you've got digital content. You know, our kids are going to be brought up in a digital world, a digital life. I think it's just progress. That's the next stage of it. They're going to go into VR. That's what they're going to be used to.
I don't think we'll think about it as a metaverse. Sorry, Caroline, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's going to be a real push around the actual hardware, because that's something that we've seen over the recent years when we talk about the climate and things like that. You know, the fact that our hardware runs out so quickly. So what is the future of hardware look like, and how do we make it last longer, and what does that look like? Because you know, we're getting away from that throwaway culture. You know, we've already talked about what that looks like in fashion, that fast fashion. Well, what's that going to look like in regards to fast hardware? Because, you know, we are throwing away technology left, right, and center. So what are we going to do around that? And I think with virtual reality, we need to be considering that as we continue to build over the next couple of years.
Do you want to come in there, Tom?
So I was just going to... Yeah, I was just going to say, I think if you're looking 10 years ahead, I think we won't be labeling it as the metaverse. It'll be just an extension of life. You know, you look at the internet now, you know, again, I remember 10, 15 years ago, and you know, you had dial-up, but it was a chore, and it was, you know, you had to make a conscious decision to go and do things. Now, you know, you just look things up on your phone. You don't think about it. You don't think of it even as the internet or the web or anything else. You have apps that just give information at your fingertips. And I think that's how we'll look at the metaverse. I think it'll be integrated, and it'll be different things for different people. But it'll be seamless. And I think that's really that's the direction we're moving to.
Thanks a million, folks. We've run about half an hour over time here. It's an interesting discussion, and I know rightly we could go another 2 or 3 hours chatting about this, but I just want to say thanks to all our speakers and panelists this evening. Thanks to the lads from Rose Studios for all the tech support tonight as well. Thanks to the design department for their help, and the School of Business for their support with the VR classroom pilot on the UX Masters course, and also thanks to our students for diving headfirst into the emerging tech module. And thanks also, of course, to our audience for checking in. Don't forget to watch more talks tomorrow on dice.lyitdesign.com. That starts at 9:20 tomorrow morning with Orla O'Hagan, James Dahari, Mike Pudliner, and Chloe Dahari. So maybe next year we'll be hosting all this in the metaverse, or maybe we'll be live. I'm not sure which it's going to be, but personally, I think a hybrid would be best in the short term. It is hard to beat going to a great conference, but they're few and far between. From my memory, you get the odd good one. The thing about the metaverse, from a conference point of view, similar to this, it does. Location kind of limits the options if it's a physical one. So the metaverse does open the doors that way. But I suppose I don't think the question is should we or shouldn't we. It's more, for me, it's more how much are you in. And as designers, I think there's responsibility there to be in there to try and influence things in a positive way. And just on reflection on tonight, I suppose like anything else, user experience I think will win the day. And if it progresses with that kind of UX mindset, then it has a chance of being something positive. There is always that dark element, and that's always there in new tech. But with positive influences in there, and if we take that responsibility and do go in, it has the potential to be bright. For myself, I live 1 foot in and 1 foot firmly out. I like the real world too much to leave it for too long. And so it needs to be something worthwhile for me to spend time in that virtual world. And I think creatives need to be, and as people with a user kind of focus are required to make something like that worthwhile. So thanks to everybody. In the meantime, we'll see you soon, and bye for now. Hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.